Picture the most dysfunctional family you know. Now multiply that dysfunction by infinity, add omnipotent powers, eternal life, and the ability to destroy civilizations with a temper tantrum. Congratulations, you've just imagined a typical Tuesday dinner with the Greek gods. We're talking about a family where the grandfather ate his own children, the father overthrew his dad by castrating him, brothers wage eternal wars over who gets to rule which realm, and the family patriarch has a habit of transforming into animals to seduce mortals behind his wife's back. And somehow, this chaotic mess of divine beings managed to create and govern the entire universe. Welcome to Professor Archive, where we unravel history's most complex and fascinating stories. I'm your host, and I'm about to take you on a journey through the most complicated family tree in all of mythology. One so intricate and twisted that it makes modern soap operas look like children's bedtime stories. Because the Greek pantheon isn't just a collection of powerful deities, it's a multi-generational saga of power, betrayal, love, revenge, and cosmic consequences that spans from the literal birth of existence to the rise of mortal heroes. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. Every single relationship, every alliance, every betrayal in this divine family tree has shaped not just Greek mythology, but the very foundation of Western civilization's understanding of power, justice, love, and human nature itself. So buckle up, because we're about to dive into a family history that begins with nothingness itself and evolves into the most complex web of relationships ever conceived by human imagination. In the beginning, there was chaos. Not chaos as we understand it today, noise and confusion and disorder, but chaos as a cosmic void, an infinite expanse of nothingness that somehow possessed consciousness. Imagine trying to explain your family history and having to start with, well, first there was absolutely nothing, and then that nothing decided to have children. From this primordial void emerged the first generation of existence itself. Gaia, the Earth, simply willed herself into being. She wasn't born, she wasn't created, she just was. And immediately this cosmic mother figure did what any self-respecting primordial deity would do. She created a husband for herself. His name was Uranus, the sky, and their marriage would set the tone for every dysfunctional divine relationship that followed. But Gaia wasn't content with just a husband. She also gave birth to Pontus, the ancient sea, and Urea, the mountains. Think of Gaia as the ultimate mother-in-law figure. She's the earth beneath everyone's feet, literally and figuratively the foundation of everything, and she has opinions about how her children should behave. Now, here's where things get interesting. Gaia and Uranus had children together, and their offspring were the Titans. 12 incredibly powerful beings who would rule the cosmos for ages. But Uranus made a critical mistake that would echo through generations of divine family dysfunction. He was a terrible father. You see, Uranus was terrified that one of his children would overthrow him, so he did what any rational cosmic deity would do. He shoved them back into Gaia's womb immediately after they were born. Imagine the psychological trauma of being born and then immediately imprisoned inside your own mother. Gaia, understandably, was not pleased with this arrangement. The Titans trapped inside Gaia were Kronos, Rhea, Oceanus, Tethys, Hyperion, Thea, Coeus, Phoebe, Crius, Mnemosyne, Iapetus, and Themis. But Uranus didn't stop there. He also fathered the Cyclopes, the one-eyed giants who would later forge Zeus's thunderbolts, and the Hecatoncheires, 100-handed giants with 50 heads each. And guess what? He stuffed them back into Gaia too. Gaia, now literally bursting with imprisoned children and growing increasingly angry, decided enough was enough. She crafted a weapon from her own substance, a sickle made of the hardest material in existence, and gave it to her youngest and most ambitious son, Kronos. Her instructions were simple. Next time your father comes to visit me, use this. When Uranus next descended to embrace Gaia, Kronos was waiting. In one swift motion, he castrated his father with that divine sickle, forever ending Uranus's reign and his ability to father more children. The blood that fell from this cosmic castration didn't just disappear. It created new life. Where it touched the earth, the Furies sprang forth, goddesses of vengeance who would forever pursue those who committed crimes against family. Where it fell into the sea, it mingled with sea foam and gave birth to Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. Think about the symbolism here. The goddess of love was born from an act of ultimate familial violence. This sets up one of the central themes of the entire Greek pantheon, that creation and destruction, love and violence, are inextricably linked. With Uranus defeated and exiled to the furthest reaches of the sky, Kronos became the ruler of the cosmos. He freed his siblings from Gaia's womb, and they divided the world among themselves. This was the golden age of the Titans, a time when the world was supposedly perfect and peaceful. But Kronos had learned the wrong lesson from his father's paranoia. Kronos married his sister Rhea, because why break with family tradition? And they began having children. But Gaia, in her infinite wisdom and perhaps her infinite spite, gave Kronos a prophecy. One of his children would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown Uranus. Instead of learning to be a better father, Kronos decided to take a more direct approach to the problem. The moment each child was born, Kronos would snatch them up and swallow them whole. Not kill them, swallow them alive, keeping them trapped in his stomach for eternity. One by one, he devoured Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Each time Rhea begged him to spare their child, and each time Kronos ignored her pleas. But when Rhea was pregnant with her sixth child, she'd had enough. She secretly gave birth to Zeus on the island of Crete, then wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and presented it to Kronos as their newborn son. Kronos, apparently not the brightest cosmic deity, swallowed the stone without question. Meanwhile, Zeus was raised in secret by nymphs and fed on the milk of a magical goat named Amalthea. When he cried, his caretakers would bang shields and spears together to mask the sound, ensuring Kronos never discovered his location. This hidden childhood would shape Zeus's character in profound ways. He grew up knowing he was destined for greatness, but also understanding the price of power and the danger of family relationships. When Zeus reached adulthood, he returned to challenge his father, but not through direct confrontation. Instead, he employed cunning worthy of his eventual reputation. Disguising himself as a servant, Zeus gave Kronos a potion that would make him vomit up everything in his stomach. Kronos, still apparently not the sharpest divine tool in the shed, drank it willingly. The results were spectacular and disgusting. Kronos immediately began vomiting up Zeus's siblings, fully grown, fully aware, and absolutely furious about their extended stay in their father's digestive system. First came the stone that Kronos had swallowed instead of Zeus, then Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and finally Hestia. But the family reunion was short-lived, because Zeus immediately declared war on the Titans. This wasn't just a simple power struggle, this was a cosmic conflict that would determine the fundamental nature of reality itself. The war, known as the Titanomachy, lasted for 10 years and nearly destroyed the universe in the process. The Titans weren't going down without a fight. Led by Kronos, they commanded incredible powers over time, memory, light, and the fundamental forces of nature. But Zeus had advantages his father lacked. His siblings fought willingly beside him, he had inherited his grandfather's strategic cunning, and most importantly, he was willing to make alliances that the Titans had rejected. Zeus freed the Cyclopes and the Hecatonchires from their eternal imprisonment and recruited them to his cause. The Cyclopes, grateful for their freedom, forged incredible weapons for the new generation of gods. They gave Zeus his famous thunderbolts, Poseidon his trident that could cause earthquakes, and Hades a helmet of invisibility that would allow him to move unseen through any realm. The Hecatonchires, with their 100 hands and 50 heads each, became living siege engines, hurling boulders and entire mountains at the Titan forces. The war was so violent that it shook the foundations of existence itself, causing earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and cosmic storms that threatened to return the universe to primordial chaos. But the turning point came when Zeus managed to recruit some of the Titans to his side. Prometheus, whose name means forethought, had the wisdom to see that Zeus's cause was just and his victory inevitable. Several other Titans, recognizing that the old order was corrupt and unsustainable, switched sides or remained neutral. When Zeus finally achieved victory, he showed both mercy and strategic thinking that his grandfather and father had lacked. Rather than destroy the defeated Titans, he imprisoned most of them in Tartarus, the deepest pit of the underworld, where they would be guarded for eternity by the Hecatoncheires. But he allowed some Titans who had supported him or remained neutral to keep their positions and roles in the cosmos. With the Titans defeated, Zeus and his siblings had to divide the cosmos among themselves. In a gesture that would have seemed impossible to previous generations, they decided to draw lots rather than fight each other for supremacy. Zeus drew the sky and became king of the gods. Poseidon received the seas and all waters, and Hades was given dominion over the underworld and the dead. But here's where the family dynamics get really interesting, because having established themselves as the new rulers of the cosmos, the Olympian siblings immediately began the complex web of relationships, rivalries, and alliances that would define Greek mythology for millennia. Zeus, now the undisputed king of the gods, faced a problem that had destroyed his father and grandfather: how to maintain power without repeating their mistakes. His solution was characteristically clever and characteristically problematic. He would share power with his family and other gods, but he would also ensure his own position through a combination of political marriages, strategic alliances, and an absolutely staggering number of extramarital affairs. Zeus's first wife was actually Metis, a titaness whose name means wisdom or cunning. But Gaia, still the family prophet apparently, warned Zeus that Metis would bear a child who would be more powerful than his father. Learning from his father's and grandfather's examples, Zeus decided to take preemptive action. But instead of castrating or imprisoning Metis, he simply swallowed her whole while she was pregnant. This might seem like the same mistake Kronos made, but Zeus had a different plan. Metis continued to exist inside Zeus, serving as his internal advisor and the source of his legendary wisdom. And when their child was ready to be born, she emerged fully grown and fully armored from Zeus's forehead. This was Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, who became Zeus's favorite child and most trusted advisor. But Zeus's real political masterstroke was his marriage to Hera, his sister, and the goddess of marriage and family. This alliance solidified Zeus's position as king of the gods and created the royal family that would rule Olympus. However, it also created the template for what might be the most dysfunctional marriage in all of mythology. Hera was a powerful goddess in her own right, commanding respect and fear from both mortals and immortals. She was beautiful, intelligent, and absolutely ruthless when crossed. But Zeus's chronic infidelity would turn her into the most vengeful and bitter spouse in mythological history. And Zeus didn't just cheat occasionally, he made infidelity into an art form. Zeus's affairs weren't random or purely lustful. Each relationship served multiple purposes. They expanded his influence into different realms and among different populations. They produced children who would become important gods and heroes, and they demonstrated his power and virility to both divine and mortal audiences. With the Titaness Leto, Zeus fathered Apollo and Artemis, the twin gods of the sun and hunt respectively. But Hera, jealous and enraged, pursued Leto across the earth, forbidding any land from giving her sanctuary. Leto finally found refuge on the floating island of Delos, where she gave birth to two of the most important gods in the pantheon. With the Titaness Maia, Zeus fathered Hermes, the messenger god and patron of thieves, travelers, and trade. Hermes would become one of Zeus's most useful children, serving as his herald and the psychopomp who guided souls between the world of the living and the dead. But Zeus's most famous affair was with the mortal woman Alcmene, which resulted in the birth of Heracles, known to Romans as Hercules. This relationship would cause more divine drama than almost any other, as Hera's jealousy and revenge against Heracles would drive some of the most famous stories in all of Greek mythology. Zeus also had a particularly creative affair with the mortal princess Danae. When Danae's father locked her in a bronze tower to prevent any man from reaching her, Zeus simply transformed himself into a shower of golden rain and impregnated her anyway. Their son was Perseus, who would become one of the greatest heroes of Greek mythology. And then there was Europa, a Phoenician princess whom Zeus courted by transforming himself into a beautiful white bull. When Europa climbed onto the bull's back, Zeus carried her across the sea to Crete, where they had 3 sons together. One of these sons was Minos, who would become the king of Crete and whose name would give us the word Minoan for that ancient civilization. Each of these affairs not only produced important mythological figures, but also created complex family relationships that would drive countless stories. Zeus's children often found themselves caught between their father's favoritism and Hera's revenge, creating a dynamic tension that permeated the entire pantheon. But Zeus wasn't the only Olympian with a complicated love life. His brothers were equally creative in their romantic endeavors, though perhaps slightly less prolific. Poseidon, the god of the seas, had a particular fondness for shape-shifting during his romantic encounters. He courted the Gorgon Medusa in Athena's temple, an act of sacrilege that caused Athena to transform Medusa into the monster with snakes for hair whose gaze could turn people to stone. With Medusa, Poseidon fathered the winged horse Pegasus and the giant Chrysaor. Poseidon also pursued the nymph Scylla, but when she rejected his advances, he asked the sea witch Circe for a love potion. Unfortunately, Circe fell in love with Poseidon herself, and instead of helping him win Scylla, she poisoned the pool where Scylla bathed, transforming her into the 6-headed monster who would terrorize sailors alongside the whirlpool Charybdis. Hades, despite ruling the gloomy underworld, also had his romantic pursuits, though his most famous relationship began with what was essentially divine kidnapping. When Hades fell in love with Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, he abducted her while she was picking flowers and carried her to the underworld to be his queen. Demeter's grief and rage at losing her daughter caused all plant life on Earth to die, creating the first winter and threatening to destroy all mortal life through starvation. Eventually, Zeus had to intervene, negotiating a compromise where Persephone would spend part of each year with Hades in the underworld and part with her mother on Earth. This myth became the explanation for the changing seasons, but it also established one of the most important power couples in the pantheon. The female Olympians were equally complex in their relationships and equally powerful in their own right. Hera, despite her focus on marriage and family, was one of the most feared gods in the pantheon. Her revenge against Zeus's lovers and children was legendary for its creativity and cruelty. She turned Io into a cow and sent a gadfly to torment her across the earth. She tricked Semele into asking Zeus to appear before her in his true form, knowing that mortal eyes couldn't survive seeing Zeus's divine lightning. Athena, born from Zeus's head, remained a virgin goddess, but her relationships with heroes and mortals were some of the most important in Greek mythology. She mentored heroes like Perseus, Theseus, and Odysseus, providing them with the wisdom and strategic thinking necessary to achieve impossible tasks. Artemis, Apollo's twin sister, also remained virgin, but she commanded fierce loyalty from her followers and swift punishment for those who crossed her. When the hunter Actaeon accidentally saw her bathing, she transformed him into a deer and watched as his own hunting dogs tore him apart. Aphrodite, born from the sea foam of Uranus's castration, brought love and desire wherever she went, but her own love life was complicated even by Olympian standards. She was married to Hephaestus, the god of metalworking and craftsmanship, in what was essentially a political arrangement. But her most famous affair was with Ares, the god of war, creating a symbolic union between love and violence that would echo throughout Greek culture. Hephaestus, despite being the least conventionally attractive of the Olympians, he was lame and scarred from his work at the forge, was actually one of the most important gods. He created the weapons and tools that other gods used, including Zeus's thunderbolts, Poseidon's trident, and countless magical items for heroes and mortals. The relationships between the Olympian siblings were further complicated by their children, who formed the next generation of the divine family tree. Apollo and Artemis, the twins born to Leto, represented complementary aspects of divine power. Apollo as the god of music, poetry, and rational thought. Artemis as the goddess of the hunt and wild nature. Apollo's love life was particularly tragic, marked by relationships that ended in transformation and loss. He pursued the nymph Daphne, who begged her father to save her from Apollo's advances and was transformed into a laurel tree. Apollo's love for the beautiful youth Hyacinthus ended when a discus thrown by Apollo accidentally killed his beloved, and Apollo transformed Hyacinthus's blood into the flower that bears his name. Hermes, the son of Zeus and Maia, became one of the most versatile and important gods in the pantheon. As the messenger of the gods, he could travel between all realms, Olympus, Earth, and the underworld. His relationships often reflected his role as a boundary crosser and trickster, including affairs with both gods and mortals that produced children who inherited his cleverness and ability to move between worlds. But perhaps the most important addition to the Olympian family came through an unconventional route. Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and theater, was born under circumstances that perfectly illustrate the complexity of divine family relationships. Zeus had an affair with the mortal princess Semele, but Hera, in her jealousy, disguised herself as an old woman and convinced Semele to ask Zeus to appear before her in his true divine form. When Zeus reluctantly agreed, his lightning killed Semele instantly. But Zeus rescued their unborn child, sewing the baby into his own thigh until it was ready to be born. Dionysus thus became the twice-born god, and his unusual birth gave him a unique perspective on both mortal and divine experience. Dionysus's introduction to Olympus represented something new in the pantheon, a god who understood transformation, who embodied the thin line between civilization and wildness, order and chaos. His followers, the Maenads, would enter ecstatic frenzies that could lead to both divine inspiration and terrible violence. As the Olympian family tree expanded, the relationships became increasingly complex. Gods had children with mortals, creating heroes whose stories would become central to Greek culture. Nymphs and minor deities filled specific roles in the cosmic order, while also participating in the endless web of divine relationships. The 9 Muses, daughters of Zeus and the Titaness Mnemosyne, presided over the arts and sciences, inspiring mortal creativity, while serving as examples of divine perfection in their respective fields. Each muse had her own domain: Calliope for epic poetry, Clio for history, Erato for love poetry, and so on. But together they represented the Greek belief that divine inspiration was necessary for human achievement. The 3 Fates, daughters of either Zeus and Themis, or born from Nyx herself, controlled the destiny of both mortals and gods. Clotho spun the thread of life, Lachesis measured its length, and Atropos cut it when the time came. Even Zeus, king of the gods, couldn't override the decisions of the Fates, establishing limits on divine power that would become central to Greek tragic drama. The Graces, also daughters of Zeus, embodied charm, beauty, and creativity, while the Hours controlled the progression of time and the changing of seasons. Each group of divine siblings represented different aspects of cosmic order and human experience, creating a pantheon that could address every aspect of mortal life. But the family tree didn't stop with the Olympians and their immediate children. Lesser gods and goddesses filled every niche of the natural and supernatural world. Pan, the god of shepherds and the wild, was said to be the son of Hermes and lived in the countryside, causing the panic that bears his name when he was disturbed. The river gods, each ruling a specific waterway, were the sons of Oceanus and Tethys. The wind gods, Boreas of the north wind, Notus of the south, Eurus of the east, and Zephyrus of the west, were the children of Eos, goddess of the dawn, and the Titan Astraeus. Hecate, the goddess of magic and crossroads, occupied a unique position in the pantheon as a goddess who predated the Olympians but maintained her power and influence throughout the changes in divine leadership. She commanded respect from all the gods and had the rare ability to grant or withhold prosperity from mortals. The complexity of these relationships meant that nearly every aspect of human experience had a divine patron or explanation. Love, war, wisdom, craftsmanship, agriculture, the hunt, music, poetry, medicine, prophecy, magic, each had its own god or goddess, and each deity's personality and relationships reflected Greek understanding of these forces. But what's truly remarkable about the Greek pantheon is how these family relationships created a coherent cosmology that addressed fundamental questions about human nature and the universe. The gods weren't perfect beings who existed above human concerns. They were flawed, passionate, jealous, and complex characters whose stories served as both entertainment and instruction for mortal audiences. The pattern of generational conflict that runs through the divine family tree, Kronos overthrowing Uranus, Zeus overthrowing Kronos, reflects the Greek understanding that progress requires revolution, that old orders must be displaced by new ones. But Zeus's more inclusive approach to power, sharing authority with his siblings and incorporating former enemies into his administration, suggested that sustainable leadership required collaboration rather than tyranny. The endless romantic entanglements of the gods served multiple narrative purposes. They explained the origins of heroes, demigods, and important mortal lineages. They provided justification for religious practices and cultural traditions. And they explored the complexities of desire, power, and responsibility in ways that resonated with human experience. Zeus's infidelities, for example, weren't just examples of divine misbehavior. They were metaphors for the creative power of the masculine principle, the way divine energy could manifest in unexpected ways throughout the mortal world. Hera's jealousy and revenge weren't just divine soap opera drama. They represented the destructive potential of wounded pride and the consequences of broken trust. The virgin goddesses, Athena, Artemis, and Hestia, represented the power of independence and self-determination, showing that divine feminine energy didn't have to be defined through relationships with masculine figures. Hestia, the goddess of the hearth and home, was actually the most important deity in daily religious practice, receiving the first offering at every sacrifice, even though her stories were less dramatic than those of her siblings. The relationships between gods and mortals created the hero tradition that became central to Greek culture. Heroes like Perseus, Theseus, Jason, and Heracles were the children of divine mortal unions, possessing supernatural abilities while remaining fundamentally human in their struggles and limitations. These heroes served as intermediaries between the divine and mortal worlds, accomplishing tasks that were beyond normal human capability, while also representing human potential and aspiration. Their stories typically involved overcoming seemingly impossible challenges through a combination of divine assistance, personal courage, and clever problem-solving. But even the heroes were embedded in the complex family relationships of the pantheon. Perseus was not only the son of Zeus and Danae, but also the great-grandfather of Heracles through his daughter Andromeda. Theseus was the son of Poseidon and became the legendary king of Athens. Jason led the Argonauts in search of the Golden Fleece with the help of multiple gods and goddesses. Heracles, perhaps the most famous of all Greek heroes, exemplifies the complexity of divine family relationships. As the son of Zeus and the mortal woman Alcmene, he inherited incredible strength and resilience. But Hera's hatred made his life a series of trials and tribulations that would have destroyed a lesser hero. The 12 labors of Heracles weren't just arbitrary challenges. They were specifically designed by Hera to kill him, and each labor connected him to different aspects of the divine family tree. The Nemean lion he fought was the offspring of monsters connected to the primordial deities. The Hydra was another child of these ancient forces. The Cerberus he captured was Hades' own guard dog. Through these labors, Heracles essentially worked his way through the entire cosmological hierarchy, proving his worth not just as a hero, but as a legitimate member of the divine family, despite being born to a mortal mother. His eventual apotheosis, transformation into a full god after his death, represented the ultimate resolution of his complicated family situation. The Greek pantheon also included numerous minor deities and personified concepts that filled out the family tree in fascinating ways. Nike, the goddess of victory, was often depicted as Zeus's constant companion. Irene represented peace, Dike represented justice, and Eunomia represented good order. These personifications showed how the Greeks understood abstract concepts as divine forces with their own personalities and family relationships. The Oceanids, the 3,000 daughters of Oceanus and Tethys, served as nymphs of springs, rivers, and other bodies of water. Many of them became the mothers of important figures in Greek mythology, creating connections between the natural world and the divine realm. The Pleiades, 7 sisters who were daughters of the Titan Atlas, became both a constellation and important figures in various mythological stories. Their relationships with gods like Zeus and Poseidon produced heroes and kings, while their transformation into stars provided an explanation for astronomical phenomena. What emerges from this incredibly complex family tree is a picture of divine relationships that mirror and amplify human ones. The gods experience love, jealousy, rivalry, loyalty, betrayal, and reconciliation, just as mortals do, but their actions have cosmic consequences that affect the entire universe. The Greek pantheon represents one of humanity's most sophisticated attempts to create a comprehensive explanation for the nature of existence. Every natural phenomenon, every aspect of human experience, every question about life and death and meaning finds its place within this intricate web of divine relationships. But perhaps most importantly, the Greek god family tree demonstrates that power and wisdom don't necessarily go together, that being immortal doesn't make you perfect, and that family relationships are complicated no matter what level of existence you occupy. The gods make mistakes, learn from them, sometimes, and continue to grow and change throughout their eternal lives. The influence of these divine family relationships extends far beyond ancient Greece. Roman mythology adopted and adapted most of these figures, giving them new names but maintaining their essential characteristics and relationships. Renaissance art and literature drew heavily on these stories, and modern psychology has found in Greek mythology a rich source of archetypes and symbols for understanding human behavior. When we talk about someone having an Achilles heel, we're referencing the complex divine family relationships that made the hero Achilles nearly invulnerable except for one small spot. When we describe someone as having a narcissistic personality, we're drawing on the story of Narcissus, whose fate was determined by divine intervention. When we talk about an Odyssey, we're referencing the epic journey of Odysseus, whose adventures were shaped by his relationships with various gods and goddesses. The psychological insights embedded in these family relationships continue to resonate because they capture something fundamental about human nature and the experience of being alive in a complex world. The Greeks understood that life involves navigating relationships with figures who have power over us, that our origins shape but don't determine our destinies, and that wisdom comes from understanding our place within larger patterns and systems. Looking at the complete Greek god family tree, what becomes clear is that this isn't just a collection of stories about supernatural beings. It's a sophisticated philosophical and psychological system disguised as entertainment. Every relationship, every conflict, every resolution contains insights about how power works, how families function, how societies develop, and how individuals can find meaning and purpose within larger structures. The fact that we're still telling these stories, still finding new meanings in these ancient relationships, and still using these characters as metaphors for modern experiences suggests that the Greeks succeeded in creating something truly universal. They gave us a family tree that encompasses all of human experience, from the most cosmic questions about the nature of existence to the most intimate concerns about love, identity, and belonging. That brings us to the end of our journey through the labyrinthine family tree of the Greek gods here at Professor Archive. If you've made it this far, you now understand why family reunions on Olympus were probably even more awkward than your own, and why Zeus might have preferred transforming into animals rather than dealing with his relatives directly. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you want more deep dives into mythology, ancient history, and the fascinating stories that have shaped human civilization for thousands of years. What's your favorite Greek god family drama? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Just remember, unlike the gods, we encourage civil discourse here. Until next time, this is Professor Archive reminding you that no matter how complicated your family relationships might seem, at least your grandfather probably didn't try to eat you. Thank the gods for small favors.